All right, next on the card, and this is one that has been pretty controversial, right? And this is Marlon Moraes versus Jose Aldo. And right off the bat, I have to start off by saying that Jose Aldo looked way better at 135 than I thought he was going to. He didn't seem drained throughout the fight. Um, he didn't throw a lot of leg kicks, but I don't think that had anything to do with like the weight cut. That's been something that's kind of been missing from Aldo's game in his past few fights. He hasn't been throwing them as frequently. And this was a controversial one, right? And I think that this is another example of one of those fights that highlights a problem with our scoring system, right? Because I thought personally that the first round was very close. You had Marlon Moraes hurt Aldo early on with that left high kick, hit him with it again. Aldo recovered well. I mean, don't get me wrong, but Moraes was still finding success, right? And he was landing, I think he landed a few more shots than Aldo, a few more significant shots. I know Aldo was pumping stuff out and returning stuff when Moraes threw, but throughout the first round, Moraes, I thought, was landing the more significant strikes, finding success with that like lunging step-in jab, which he kind of started finding success with again in the third round, right? So this is why judging can get confusing, right? Because okay, let's assume that you gave the first round to Moraes, because I know Aldo hurt him at the end of the round, but then he secured that throw, got on top, ended the round on top, like. So let's just say, and by the way, I thought the first round could have went either way, but I probably personally would have gave the edge to Marlon Moraes. It was close though, right? Second round, not close at all. But here's the problem, is that the first round was scored a 10-9 for Marlon Moraes, and the second round, assuming that you think Moraes won the first, I'm not saying you thought that, but let's just assume for the sake of this conversation that you thought Moraes won the first round. So you got a 10-9 for Moraes and a 10-9 for Aldo. How you're never going to the problem is that the second round wasn't quite like devastating enough to give Aldo a 10-8, but how is the second round a 10-9 and the first round was a 10-9? Because the margin that Aldo won by in the second round was so much larger than the margin that Moraes won by in the first round if you gave him the first round, right? So that's where I have problems. And then the third round was razor thin as well. And again, this is what I mean. Like Aldo controlling the pace and the footwork and stuff, like in the third round, even if you gave it to Moraes, it still felt like Jose Aldo won the fight because this is the problem with scoring round by round. You're going to get a bunch of 10-9s, but the second round was the most significant round of the fight by far. And I did think that Moraes came out and did more work than they thought he did. He landed some leg kicks in the third round again, finding success with that step-in lunge and jab. Landed some nice shots. Aldo was returning too. He was returning, and he was controlling the footwork battle. Whereas like Moraes was moving, taking his shots, and then getting back out. Which isn't a bad game plan all the time, but there's like when Dominic Cruz implements his style like that, it's like it's weird, right? Because he's not applying the pressure, but he's kind of leading the dance. He's controlling the footwork battle, and it more felt like Aldo was in control of the footwork, but he wasn't quite putting out the volume that really could have locked that round in for him. But regardless, okay, so this is what I say all the time. If you think about what scoring a fight means, right? It's, to me, every single time that you start a round, it's like a scale, right? It starts out right here. Both are even, right? And as one guy goes and he starts doing more, he puts more weight on his scale, right? And it starts going like this. So the problem is that the first round for Moraes might have won, but like just barely like this. But Aldo won the second round by like a way larger margin, right? Like significantly more. So like I don't understand why can't you have, instead of a 10-point must system, why can't you just have 10 points available? And the first round would be like, I don't even care if you use decimal points. And I want to make a note that before I get into explaining like how I think the judging should work, and it's just an idea. I'm not saying it's right, but you need competent judges, people who understand what they're watching. So I want to get that out of the way before we get into this. But okay, so if you had 10 points available and you could, like, why couldn't the first round, if you gave it to Moraes, why shouldn't that be like a 5.5 to a 4.5 round, right? Because it was razor thin. And then the second round, wouldn't that feel more of like a, like, I don't know. I wouldn't even know what to give it. Wouldn't that feel more of like a like a 6-4 round to you, or maybe like a 6.5 to a 3.5 round for Aldo. You know, he won. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot that Moraes did in that round. He didn't offer anything, and I thought that Aldo controlled it completely, right? So now I'm going to have to do some fucking math here. I'm going to have to get a calculator out, so bear with me, please. All right, so you got, let's assume that we did what I just said, right? And you give Moraes 5.5 points in the first round, but you only give him 3.5 points in the second round, right? So now he's at 9 points. And you give Aldo 4.5 points for the first round, assuming that you think he lost, right? And then you give him 6.5 points for the second round. Now Aldo's at 11, and you've got 11-9. Now Marlon Moraes going into the third round, because Aldo did so well in the second round, Moraes, the pressure is on him to make up for it. And if you got another 1 point, even if you give the third round to Moraes, it's barely his round. So you give him another 5.5 points even, like let's assume 5.5 to 4.5 round. And he's at what? 14.5 points, and Aldo is still at 11 plus 15.5. So you got a 15.5 to a 14.5 fight, right? That's, I mean, I don't know if you guys are following my logic. If maybe I need to elaborate on that a little more, but to me, that's what makes the most sense, because you're getting a real, like, 10-9 doesn't make any sense. There's a 1 point differential. But what you're looking for is how big is the gap between what each guy did. To me, Jose Aldo won the fight, but in the scoring system, the current one that we have, I can understand why Moraes got it. It doesn't make fucking sense. Aldo won the fight as a whole, but with the current scoring system, you're going to see more stuff like this. I think Yoel Romero is a guy who, like, just based on his fighting style, he gets fucked by the system, you know? What you want is a scoring system that is representative of the gap. The gap, like how far away is each guy pulling in each round? And you should have to make up for it accordingly. Marlon Moraes did not have to make up in the third round what he should have had to make up in order to win that fight. So, current scoring system, I don't think it's a robbery. In terms of who won the fight, yeah, Jose Aldo got robbed. He won that fucking fight.